One. And you are live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Endgame. Tonight, we're going to be talking about hacking and information security. Tonight, we have three presenters with us. We have Pop Lapo, we have Fern of Faith, and we have Psych. Please enjoy the stream.
Awesome. Thank you, Gur. That was great.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us at Endgame. Our guest host tonight is Fear No Faith, or just Fear.
Yeah, Fear is fine.
Yeah, so
Fear is good.
So you have some experience with computer security. What is your experience like? What is your background?
So I've been working in computer security for 2 years. It was a hobby prior to that. I was in banking, so I experienced a lot of the other side of computer security, being on the end where we wanted to prevent hackers from getting out into the bank. But now I actually work for a security company, doing a few different things. Currently, I have my Security Plus certification through CompTIA, and I just recently passed my Certified Ethical Hacker exam through InfoSec. I've taken SANS courses in general penetration testing, and I also just took one in general web app pen testing.
Okay, great.
That's my background.
So when you say it's a hobby,
half of those things.
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms.
Yeah. Wow.
So what is a hobby? What do you do? Like when it was a hobby, what did you do for that exactly?
Well, I would always just keep up on current events, viruses that were coming out. It was something that always interested me. So I would just immerse myself in it. I remember the first time I got a family computer, I would just go through and see what everything did. It's always been an interest for me. I'd have to say my first experience, quote unquote, hacking is I got into our school's Active Directory, and while I was sitting in class, just started telling people where they lived, and they got freaked out by that. Yeah.
I'm sure they did.
Was that college or high school?
Middle school.
Middle school.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
I was just bored.
God knows where.
Damn. Wow.
So you've had an interest in this for a while, and what interests you most about it? Like we've kind of in our discussions about this, you've kind of mentioned like a political sphere. There's also like I guess kind of a domestic consumer sphere of things. Is one more interesting than the other?
I love the political aspect of all of it, and how it can change the world and make it a smaller place and closer together, or completely tear it apart and make it cease to exist.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, not to be like super scary, but
yeah.
So can you give us an example of what?
Oh, of course.
Scary?
Like our talk tonight, I wanted to focus on the Stuxnet virus that came about a few years ago, and how it can affect the entire world, and how it changed the political climate of how we conduct ourselves in the cyber world.
And so can you explain a little bit about what Stuxnet was?
So Stuxnet was a worm, and everything I say is classified, and it's not technically out in the open from either of the governments I'm going to speak of tonight. So it's purely opinion and hasn't been proven, and no one will admit to it, but there are clues strung about everywhere. But Stuxnet was a worm developed jointly by Israel and the U.S. to sabotage the Iranian nuclear facilities, to put their uranium enrichment back beyond years, because there wasn't a current diplomatic solution, mostly because of the Iraq War.
Okay, so this place that they targeted. When did this take place?
The operation started right before our former president George W. Bush left office, so around 2006 and 2007. And the operation carried on through the next president, Barack Obama, and it kind of came to light around 2011, 2010. It was discovered then.
All right, and was it targeting a weapons facility, or was it a
uranium enrichment facility, specifically the Natanz uranium enrichment facility in Iran? It was the goal of the entire thing was to get them to, stop making enrich uranium for weapons, which has been the goal of Iran since the 1970s, and the Shah of Iran was overthrown.
And so when I was doing some reading, it said that the NSA first had this exploit, or was first using this exploit before Stuxnet was. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So the NSA has no authoritative command to use any weapons in cyber warfare. Give me one moment. There's I can't remember the organization, but they work with the NSA.
Yeah.
It was Cyber Command. That's what it was. The Cyber Command works with the NSA
My bad.
to use these. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. To use these attacks in cyber warfare. But they first tested it on local machinery. They're PLCs, programmable logic controllers, things that every day run our lives, from gas pumps to the water pumps at the water facilities to the nuclear power plants. And they would infect specific ones and make the code do what they wanted. In Stuxnet's case, they wanted to interrupt the centrifuge uranium enrichment process and effectively set Iran back years of progress by continuously ruining the enriched uranium so they couldn't do further research.
See. Okay, and
No problem. Accepted. You gotta like turn advertise back on and off again.
So like how did this actually work? Like I've heard about worms and attacks and things like that, but like how does it actually, what is the kind of mechanism behind it? Like how did this actually shut something down like that?
There is a lot of code involved, and it was interesting to see it go to this level because there was almost no bugs in the code. So Kaspersky Labs first got a hold of the code itself, and when they got a hold of the code, they started picking it apart to see what it did. And as they were picking it apart, they realized that like it was almost perfect, that there were no bugs written in the code, and that very few places have the capability to do something like this. And it must have been something planned for a very long time. So the way it was actually spread to the Natanz nuclear facility the first time was there was a USB drop in the parking lot, and someone picked one up
can you go out to that
and put it in computers to see what it does.
Thanks.
Wait, what? Wait, someone dropped
Yes.
the
Airdropped USBs into a parking lot near the facility. Someone, out of pure curiosity, picked a USB up and stuck it into a computer to see what was on.
That's how they got into the facility? Wow.
Yep, that's the official story, or there could have there was other ones too. So Stuxnet itself had updates throughout the years to make it more efficient, quieter, and towards the end, a faster process.
Because what I read was that it propagated, or it, like, initialized itself by loading the icon in the Windows Explorer. So like when you plug in a USB drive, you can see all the files, right? And it loaded the icon, and that loading of the icon was the thing that like sent the worm into the system.
That was all it needed.
So it's so easy.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
A lot of computers, people don't disable the USB ports auto run function, so it auto ran a program.
It seems like it's just so easy to get I mean, I just always wonder, how many of us have viruses on our computer and just don't know it. And it also depends on how you define it, I guess, because there's all these backdoors, like Spectre or whatever the like Intel, vulnerabilities
the
were that were
processor.
released.
Yeah, the processor vulnerability. That's correct.
It's like, I mean, okay, I guess I want to ask you guys, the audience, I want to say thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up if you think that you probably have some kind of spyware on your computer, and thumbs down if you don't think that there's any spyware.
Oh.
It's called Windows 10.
Oh.
That's true. That's true.
Approved
You're right.
That's a
spyware.
good one.
He has a point.
I think it
It is technically spyware.
Okay, besides Windows 10, besides Microsoft spying on everything. But yeah, I'm always like, if my computer's waking up in the middle of the night and I hear my GPU going, I'm like, is someone mining cryptocurrency on my computer right now? Like, it's just, it seems
I can see where those words come from.
to be hacked.
Especially in working in this field, I'll have that happen to me. Like I'll be laying on my couch and my computer will light up, and I'll be like, "Why?"
Yeah.
So it's difficult to have those thoughts. I will say, it's a lot harder to get a larger virus on your computer nowadays than it used to be. The old web used to be just full of them everywhere, and there was a lot of exploits and code people could expose at will. A lot of those code exploits don't exist as much in the wild. So, which is going to segue me back to what I wanted to talk about is the fact that Stuxnet itself had 4 0 days built into it. 0 days are exploits in code that haven't been discovered yet. They can go for lots of money on the black market, and governments will pay you a good chunk of change for them too if you discover them, depending on what they are. But that's
Okay, so the people who designed this just happened to find 4 0-day exploits that no one had ever found before?
They might not have found them. They might have contracted someone that found them. People may have given it to them in exchange for cash, but the person who made it had access to 4 0 days.
Or also with the total surveillance that occurs, it's possible that they could just be someone discovers them, and then they're being surveilled, and therefore, it's also
possible,
discovered
but
by other agencies.
The likelihood of someone who is doing that for a living, covering their tracks, they probably are unlikely to be the person who they pretend to be. So I'm sure that they handed it over to somebody. It's
Interesting.
People who value anonymity or being anonymous definitely will make sure they're anonymous as much as possible.
Interesting. Okay. And I see Pika. Did you have a question too or thought? I see you're lined up in the center.
Okay, yeah, I have a question. We do talk about a lot about individual security of our PCs, but with companies like Equifax, it's leaking out all of our social security numbers and all of our information. It's I have a filing cabinet of all of my government documentation, and then I'm just thinking what's the point? If there are companies out there are just leaking our information 24/7, why do I have this folder, this manila folder of all my government IDs in it if it's just already out there? What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting.
Is there a word for that when all these different systems are propagating security risks by sharing information without anybody else's involvement? The Equifax thing is frustrating because I never agreed to have my information owned by them, but they own it anyway, right? Sounds it's like a systematic security risk.
That is, and you're right. You unfortunately you have an expectation of privacy with these things, and for some reason, sometimes people just don't. They don't do what they need to do, or like before, programming languages that have exploits built into them put those things at risk. With Equifax being one of the credit agencies that the U.S. government allows to have that kind of information, they should be held up to governmental standards and not private company standards of their security. And they're not, because they're a private company, and we know how America is. They let their private companies do what they want.
But, sure, okay.
But I don't. I'm completely on board with companies needing to take security more seriously, especially with all the information that's shared between people nowadays.
But I mean, coming back to what Pika just asked, I mean, is there there's a part of me that feels like, all right, my social security number has been hacked. My passwords on all my accounts have been hacked. Banks will probably reverse charges if my money is withdrawn. The Social Security Administration will probably, it'll be a pain, but I'll have to file with them if something's stolen. I feel like we're almost shifting towards an age where we've been forced and manufactured to consent to all of our information being out there and known by people. And there's just, when you're saying companies should have better security, it's should they? Is that really going to stop? Maybe it'll stop maybe it's tiers and layers of security because it's other state actors probably can access it, but maybe, a random hacker can't. I don't know. It's really, it seems kind of
Yeah, that's the scary part about state actors. They have infinite resources and infinite time.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, you shouldn't feel that way because they do take steps to secure your information. They definitely take steps to encrypt it, make it difficult for them to get. It's seldom that you'll find your social security number just sitting in the wild, but it does happen sometimes. But in most of these kind of companies, it was at least encrypted, and it's going to take time for them to get that information. So, with any luck, they'll never get around to yours, right?
Security is becoming more and more people are becoming aware of it as time goes on, right? Like you said before, the early web, like there were viruses everywhere because people just didn't know yet to like how what things were a risk and what things were not. And like HTTPS was invented so that we'd have like a common protocol for encrypting data across the web. So there are forces working against that as well.
Yeah.
But it's probably it's one of those
it's an arms race. It's so someone it's an arms race. So someone will someone will do something that prevents something from happening, and someone's going to try to get around it consistently. And it's just it's going to be like that forever because people want that information and you want to protect it. So it's only going to get more interesting because technology is only getting better. And so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. All right, Doom Trooper.
Hello, thank you very much. To give a little bit of context to my question I have to you, I spent 8 years in the military. In addition to that, as a reserve, I was a domestic security contractor for the United States government under Department of Homeland Security and United States Border Patrol and Customs Service. I worked at a port facility, which one I cannot disclose at this time due to non-disclosure acts I did sign several years ago. But at the time of the Stuxnet virus, we were instructed that when we had foreign personnel coming off of boats into the United States to search their persons as per normal protocol. However, they added on to that any sort of USB drives, SD cards, mini SD cards were to be confiscated, returned, or they had to return them to their boats. In addition to this, they had several, I would say Wi-Fi jammers is the best way I can describe it, in that facility at the time, they had to go through a certain basically port setup server in order to connect to the internet.
You cut out a little bit.
Oh, can you repeat the last thing you just said?
I did.
The Wi-Fi.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh.
That's fine. Actually, a lot of the stuff I can talk about sort of now because a lot of it did come out at one point in time. But there was for a time, if you were a foreign national entering into the United States under either a port facility or somewhere else, any sort of USB drives and everything else were confiscated or returned to them for them to return it back to the boat, and their internet access was restricted.
Interesting.
See,
I like that. I didn't know that. That's something that's hard to find unless it's coming from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, it is coming from a horse's mouth. Again, I am no longer a part of any domestic security contracting. I'm actually a second-year cybersecurity student. So this conversation is very interesting.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
There's like a few different vectors of entry, right? There's like the someone can get in through online, and then someone can get in through like strictly like physical means, right? Like a USB drive and things like that.
Oh yeah. Relating back to the original topic, Natanz itself was an air gap facility from the rest of the internet. That's why it required the USB drop and maybe inside agents to actually keep it going. At one point, Stuxnet was spread very aggressively in the region in hopes that contractors would pick up the virus itself and bring it into the facility. That's kind of how it ended up spread around the world, and that's when it was discovered.
Okay.
Interesting.
All right, good.
Hey, my question was about.
Oh, your mic got changed. You need to change your mic back to the headset.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Yeah, your mic is another one. It's like far away from you.
Yeah, it's definitely your laptop or computer mic or something.
Is that better?
Yes, there we go.
There you go.
All right, excellent. So my question was actually just something that you might have encountered over your years of doing information security. Back when I was doing IT, occasionally, sometimes we would have to run security tests, and a lot of the time it was pretty much just testing the users by dropping USBs around the parking lot. And it would do an autorun.inf
Really?
that would respond back to our system saying, hey, just so you know, this user just picked up one of your fake USBs.
Right.
And I was wondering.
Wait. So it's specifically USBs in a parking lot.
Oh, yeah.
That's not you. That's actually what you guys did. Okay. Wow.
Oh, yeah. We had to do it all the time because we did it all the time for medical stuff. So we had to make sure who was a threat and who wasn't for doing stupid things. It's like when you spend a spoof email as well, because we do that a lot too. We did that a lot, I should say. I was wondering, like during your training or testing, do they ever go into specific training methods like that? Or do they ever go into those things in detail about different strategies you can use to train your testers, your users?
Oh yeah, that's something we've gone into in great detail. Being in the security field, which I have just joined recently, but the majority of my experience with those things come from being a banker for a just undisclosed bank that I just don't want to tell you. That's not wasn't the best part of my life. But when I was working for them as a financial consultant, a lot of we would get tests from our IT department on a consistent basis. They would leave flash drives just hanging around places in the office. They would definitely leave them in the parking lot. We would get spoof emails, phone calls from our IT department asking for information that they shouldn't be asking for, trying to socially engineer us into giving them what they want to see, to assess our risk level to the company, things like that.
That is very cool.
Yeah. So I was exposed to a lot of this before I started doing it for a living, which only grew my interest more.
Oh, I'm certain, because I mean that's just an interesting field in general of social engineering your users, because especially when it comes to USB, because it's pretty much the only way you can get into an air gap facility, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's
For those who don't
probably
know,
ways in. Okay.
air gap means like it's actually separated by air from a network, right? From like the World Wide Web or something. That's an air gap.
Like physically, there's no way of accessing it. They have their own internal network that they just use there.
Yeah, they have absolutely zero connection to the outside world.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fer.
Oh, hold on one
All
second.
right. Hi, Red Turtle.
One moment.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, hello. My question was the fact that I'm pretty sure all of us here, most of us use Steam, and why there's pros to, say, the mobile authenticator, and that doesn't really work if someone really wants to get your information. So, I'm curious.
So your two-factor authentication for your mobile authenticator?
Yes, I'm curious why. There are other pros to it, but how would you personally, if you protect someone from getting completely around it, if there is a way to do that?
The double layer of security is nice because you can't necessarily protect everyone from getting to the information, because if they are in your phone and your computer, I guess they can get to both. But the likelihood of that happening, then they're really trying to get to you. That's the thing. But if, for example, someone got to your Steam account password and tried logging in, and your phone said they were trying to log in, you're like, well, no, that's not me at all. That's a good thing, because the likelihood of getting into your phone is very slim as well. In fact, mobile security is farther ahead than your
Make
computer.
sure you have a lock on your phone screen so that at the very least they have, they can't just pick it up and get in.
Wait, you said something really that I had no idea. You said mobile security is further ahead than PC security. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's a matter of quantity. There's more people that have mobile phones in the world than have computers for their personal use. So as the market for mobile phones increases, there's more attention drawn to that specifically. So a lot of people are heightening their mobile security because like people do their banking on their phone, their email, pretty much live their entire lives on a mobile device.
I do know I've done some Android development, and there's like a whole bunch of security measures just built into the framework as a whole. Like people who are making apps like inherently can't like use another app just Right. Yeah. It's not
Mhm.
like a standard operating system. There's definitely you have to be very specific in requesting information from a contract from another app in order to use it and provide the right information to do that. So there are a few more infrastructural hurdles to overcome if you want to get into a mobile device.
And segueing off that, it's because it came after all the security. Before security was an afterthought. Security was an afterthought with the building of the first World Wide Web. No one really thought about the security. It started to become an issue when cell phones became more popular, especially with the smartphone. So security was a forethought before that started happening. Hence, probably the built-in stuff right into the Android framework.
Right.
But how can you say it's interesting? Because do you really think? I mean, DARPA started the internet, so it's like, do you really think that security wasn't in mind when they started the internet?
The internet was very tiny when it started. It was like what, eight IP addresses. So they weren't. I bet they were never thinking of the scale that it would ever get to today. Like, I don't think 30 years ago anyone thought that would be the way our lives were. We were completely connected on a consistent basis.
It's actually
But
interesting.
no one ever does.
The documentary or like the video that we watched, that some of us watched earlier, talked about the DARPA starting the internet and things like that. So it's kind of interesting to think about that and where it's come and how we share all information online, and it's a lot easier to have access to information now, kind of thing.
I think it was meant for like primarily military communications at first.
Yeah,
and then
but you think it'd be more secure, right? Like
Right,
no one else had that technology.
Right, and you still have to build a body of knowledge.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly.
No one else
You
is in
didn't
the
have
network,
any. When we talk about the arms race, like the security arms race, in order to build your own skill in security, you have to have an opponent, or else you're not going to know, where the enemy's coming from. That's like Sun Tzu, Art of War type of stuff.
That's a
really
that's a good point. Yeah.
ARPANET was military. What it was designed for is some kind of a connection, which we know as Ethernet nowadays, is basically if part of the USA gets nuked, the signal will reroute itself around the area that got nuked, and the rest of the country will still, the military will still be able to talk to each other. That's how Ethernet or internet became to be. Eventually, they branched out and let universities and colleges use it to communicate amongst themselves, and eventually it branched off to what is now known as the internet.
Yeah, when it got really big was in the academic academic field.
Yeah, like Yale, I think was one of the colleges that had access to it. Harvard, things like that.
Okay, well, thanks for the question, Red. Yeah. CH.
Right.
Yeah. Chamadex. How's it going, everybody? Hi. So,
it's all about permissions and security.
That's right. We got another tech guy in the room. Anyway, so you put these controls in place, right? You're a nuclear enrichment facility. You say, we're going to air gap our systems, right? We're not going to connect to the internet. And somebody, either through a vendor or by airdrop, gets a USB device into your location and infects you anyway. So Snowden worked at a facility where no removable media was allowed whatsoever, but he was an administrator, so he had the ability to circumvent some of those controls. You see IBM now has banned all removable media in the organization in its entirety, and you hear about some organizations that do things like pour resin in the USB ports in the machine, so they make a policy and then enforce it in the physical world.
Wow.
But despite all of these extremes, there's always a way around, right? And what it always comes back to is people. So somebody has to pick up the USB device and plug it in at Natanz, and Snowden has to become disenfranchised and want to make a point and circumvent controls from that perspective. And you send out a phishing email, it's only as good as the user who's going to click on it, right? So with all of that said, what are some things that we should be watching out for, that us as employees of the world and people want to protect our personal information and our nice expensive machines that allow us to come in here and do VR chat and stuff like that. What are some things that we want to do to protect ourselves and protect the people and organizations that we might care about?
I always joke about this, but I always, before I teach someone something, saying I'm going to drop some knowledge on you. The thing, the
Please do.
biggest thing, the biggest thing you can do is that thing exactly is educate yourself on a consistent basis about the potential threats that you could face. I know it seems like a long-winded thing to do and might take a little bit of effort, but ignorance isn't always bliss, and especially in the situation when you're trying to protect your personal information and all the things that you have. The more knowledge you gain and the more information you understand, the better off you'll be. Just like keep informed about new viruses. Make sure your computer is up to date. Research why your computer was up to date. Well, you're updated recently, because they'll tell you that there was a bug in the program that allowed X, Y, or Z to happen, and you're like, wow, that's interesting. Research everything before you download it. Understand that there's what's the word I'm looking for? Exploits and vulnerabilities in almost everything that you have. And by limiting the scope of attack, you can limit the chances that you would be attacked.
I've heard of a website. Do you know about this? The Have I Been Pwned website, where you can go and check it. HaveIBeenPwned.com or something, and you can go and see if your email credentials have been leaked in the dark web and then scooped up by a security organization later on. So it does give you some information about your own security as well.
They have. Right. That's actually someone who works in the field consistently, does a lot of security talks. His name is Troy Hunt. He's actually pretty phenomenal. Just listen to his talks. So yeah, he goes around doing that kind of thing. He'll take like the email list and put them in a public place so you could see if you're a part of the hack.
Right.
Ghoster, did you have a quick? That's how you.
So I also wanted to make mention of this USB lockout that happens on computers and stuff. Turn my camera around. Basically, you also got to remember that people have phones, and phones now are able to connect to computers and do that USB transfer anymore. So, I mean, for those plants that use basically a no USB policy, do they also have to have a phone policy as well that says you're not allowed to bring your phone in? Because phones can use Bluetooth. They can use different proxies of IF tags. They can do the IF emission, so you can log in, with your phone to card readers and stuff. I mean, are you able to say if they're able to use phones in these facilities?
Yeah, that's actually quite a common thing. A lot of companies and nuclear facilities and plants that have a high security will implement a phone policy. They'll dictate what your apps you can have on your phone. In some cases, just provide you the phone that you're going to use while you're there. And a lot of cases will monitor everything that's happening with your phone, and you will sign those rights away as you become employed there and you enter the building every day. And they will track your stuff on the phone and by MAC address and everything, and consistently be scanning the network for it. And the moment they see that your phone is either out of date, hasn't been updated, or there's something sketchy on it, they cut you off from the network immediately. And then, like Mod X was saying, for the physical portion of the USB part, they will literally dump resin in USB ports, so you can't plug anything in there anymore. So you could replace them, but I think someone would catch on to that eventually.
Well, couldn't you also get into the computer and just plug something into the SATA port or the PCI Express port if you had the card with you? Also
true.
I mean, there's, like you said, there's ways around it, but it's more difficult.
Yeah,
it's a lot more difficult.
I think they're trying to eliminate. Also, I think I have audio delay, so I hope I'm not interrupting too much. I think they're trying to go to what you're saying. I think they're trying to eliminate the human factor, which was mentioned just a second ago. I think it's more like the stupidity of a human finding a flash drive, which is actually very clever. I'm like, if I found a flash drive and I was like, oh, this might be someone, it's important. I want to return it to them. I'm going to be a good, plug it in. Although, yeah, right. Although one thing that I'm always super wary of are the USB chargers on airplanes and other places. Now there's USB ports that are just out there for charging, and I'm like. And I always think about it it's it's riddled with STDs, the virus equivalent of STDs. You don't want to put your USB port into the,
Are you saying the airline is running a scam where they're gonna like infect?
No. Okay, I'm not that
No.
conspiratorial. I'm saying that it's possible that one bad actor though could put some. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of asking this: is it possible for one bad actor to infect one port, and then over time, the people that use those ports and plug it in are spreading it, like an STD would be spread, kind of.
That's completely correct. So it's kind of funny this comes up because every time I go out to airports or anywhere, I'm always looking for stuff like that and like kind of laughing to myself. But they have these USB charging ports all over airports and train stations and things like that, and it's like I wouldn't plug my USB in there to charge my phone in 1,000 years because there's a controller for that and they can infect that. And then you plug your phone in there and then it's a virus on your phone suddenly. The only way to really prevent that, you can definitely do, is don't have a charger with a data transfer. You can just get ones for charging, and you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, like a USB cord?
The cable, that is.
Yep.
Yeah, the cable itself. You can just get a cable that only charges your phone, doesn't transfer data.
Yeah, a phone USB cable's got 4 wires in it. 2 of them are data, 2 of them are power. So you just need a cable that doesn't have the 2 data wires in it. So all it is just taking power off the port.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yep.
Use protection. That's the lesson
Yeah.
from this.
Learn anything, that's what
it is. Yeah.
It'll charge very slowly, though.
Sacrifices must be made.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Just got a power
All
bank
right.
too. Yeah. All right,
Pika, you got another question?
Yeah, I got testing. Can you hear me? Technical difficulties.
Sound great.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So, I have a big following on the internet, on YouTube and Twitter, and I have like multiple accounts though. And I know all of these accounts need to be secured because I've got a lot of 12-year-olds that think it's really funny to like try to hack into my account because like every other week I get an email that's saying that, oh, hey, did you try to log into your account from a new device? So, problem is that my darn monkey brain can't remember too many passwords, and if I use a random password generator, write it down in the black book, but if that black book is lost, like if you hold a gun to my head and tell me to log into an account, I can't remember. So like, how do I circumvent that?
Oh, the best way to circumvent that, honestly, is this seems fun, but like a password manager that has its own encryption.
But how do I know that password manager is secure?
Yeah, I've always wondered that too. How do you know?
If you get access to the password manager, all of my accounts are hijacked.
So the first thing I would do is
like Dashlane should be fine.
Yeah, don't use one that's connected to the internet. It's okay.
Yeah, my
don't use one that's
my friend Kurai actually has built his own, and he showed me a little bit of it, where basically he runs it, and it's locally encrypted on his hard drives. And so what happens is the passwords themselves are not stored. They're stored as an encryption. And then you actually have to enter the encryption password for it to decrypt your passwords for you locally.
But that's the thing. Okay, so it's locally. I do have a local system. It's called the Black Book and a pen, and I write it down in the Black Book. Well, all right.
I love it.
The nice thing about this one,
Black Book is gone, like the local hard drive. If that's gone, and then it's all gone. Like what?
He has it on his mobile device as well.
If you lost your hard drive and a book and a pen, you've got some bigger problems ahead of you.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, but the way you're doing it isn't awful. A lot of people do it that way. It's a pretty common thing to do. But like, I know it seems weird that like, oh, if I lost my hard drive, that's it. But once you get more into the security field, more about redundancy, more about things you can continuously do to protect yourself. So, for example, backing up. Yeah, so redundancy is like where I'm gonna keep my information. Like I'm gonna back it up to a hard drive or to the cloud or to something else to make sure I consistently have it. In a case where you'd be worried about people wanting to hack into your email accounts, backing up to the cloud probably wouldn't be the best idea. So an external hard drive, but you back your information up to that, would be almost the equivalent to your black book.
I mean, I kind of burned it on a CD and put it in a safe deposit box. Is that like the same thing, or?
That's not bad.
Yeah,
as
that's
long as you have the
redundancy.
information. Yeah, that's redundancy. That's
Okay.
exactly what that is.
Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess
You gotta
I
keep
also have a
track of
question about
things.
like if you're using like 1Password or something that is storing things in the cloud, and although it's encrypted, like is that? I mean, one person who had a lot of security stuff told me once that this is a long time ago though that he had 3 layers of passwords, like he had like one type of password for sites he really didn't care about, another type of password for sites that like would be kind of bad to get hacked, and then another password for banking and things like that. Like, I guess because of the danger of 1Password and these things, assuming like most people aren't going to have their own system, they're going to use these kind of commercially available things. It's like, what if someone discovers that? So like, what's more secure?
Yo, get on my level. Every single account I have is a random generated password from a website that I use on Google, and sometimes it's like 16 characters. There's no way I can remember that.
Got hacked.
The best thing to use,
right? Exactly.
The best thing to use is a passphrase. So, for example, the websites you don't really care if they get hacked. Just a normal password that doesn't really mean anything to you. Websites that are more sensitive start using passphrases. So instead of an exact like a password, just a phrase of words that only you have any relation to you or that you could remember. That way, it ends up being like 22 characters long to 26 characters long with spaces in between, which become almost impossible to enumerate, and then try to generate like tables for and things like that. Because the time taken to do those things, it probably wouldn't be worth it, and the amount of computing power it would take also isn't available to most people.
And you can individualize the passphrase and use
and like
memory techniques. Yeah,
right, so like come up with a sentence
I don't
rather
even
than just a
remember the
word.
password to VR chat account. It's in my black book.
Uh-oh.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, thank
All right,
you.
well, yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Pika.
Yeah, thanks for the question, man.
Like, you have no idea how many emails I get of someone trying to hack into my accounts because they think it's funny.
No, I believe it. It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks for your
Well, thank
for
you.
your input.
Thanks for- yeah.
I think we got Fax Nor next.
Is it Fex? I can't tell. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Hey.
So we were talking about a bit about data protection and data leakage and whatnot. And this year's big topic is the EU GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation by the EU. Do you personally think that that will actually help, or is it just security through obscurity?
Security through obscurity has always been the game. It's kind of hard. Security through obscurity.
Oh, okay.
Security through obscurity. So making it, you can get the information, but it might be a jarbled mess, right? And then having to break that encryption to get that information, making that the hard part. Because you could take the encryption and you could take the hashes of passwords and they can take all this information, but none of it's in clear text anymore. You're never going to get anything that just says the password, right? It's going to be, even if you put the word the password, it becomes this long encryption. And even then, they can encrypt that again and then encrypt it with a different algorithm. So you'd have to go through 3 different ones, and it's really difficult to do. I'm not too familiar with what the EU did, and I'm going to be looking into that soon because I just read an article. Well, I didn't read an article. It was on Reddit, and it's also memes about it, so I figured maybe it's kind of important.
It's more that you, just in short word, that you have right to access any information about you on any website at all, and that you are, or the company or the website is obligated to notify you of any breaches that they find out.
So that's wonderful, because we have a constant issue here in the United States where the company won't tell you until 7 months afterwards. Like the Equifax hack happened, and they told you like 5 months later. They knew about it. They were just trying to figure out a way to do damage control, which is the exact opposite